The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Hernandez. I'm a Business Development Manager at the Climate Action Reserve. And I just wanted to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar. It's one of our special topics webinars where we invite folks from business and the community to come and share their experiences in offsetting. And I think we've got a very interesting topic for today, and that is conferences and events offsetting, and kind of showing some case studies in sustainable event management. We've got some great guest speakers this morning, and before I get started, if I could just get a show of hands from some folks on the line to make sure that the audio is coming through okay. I always like to do that before we get going too further. And okay, it looks like I see some hands coming up, so I'm going to assume that the audio is coming through okay. And just one or two more kind of housekeeping items before we get started. As far as questions, since we have a good number of folks on the line today, I've got everybody's line muted. But if you do have any questions, feel free to enter those into the question box as we go along. And then when we open up for the Q&A with our panelists, then we'll address those questions in the order that they were received. So I think that should do it, and I will go ahead and proceed. So just really quickly wanted to give a quick overview of the agenda here. Obviously, we're kind of at the welcome and introduction. I'm going to give a quick overview of the Climate Action Reserve and the Reserve Program. Following that, Paul Salinger, Vice President of Marketing at Oracle, will give us a presentation of their strategies for sustainable events. And then Tom Rawls, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Native Energy, is going to talk about some of the work that they do in providing offsets for events and meetings and conferences of all different sizes. And following Tom's presentation, we'll open up for a question and answer. So just to give you a little background about the Climate Action Reserve, we are an independent nonprofit organization. We were formed in 2001 by state legislation to encourage voluntary emission reductions and emission reporting. We've since changed, gone from the California Climate Action Registry to the Climate Action Reserve in 2008. The mission remains the same, but we're more focused on project-level emission reductions, quantifying those reductions, and then maintaining a transparent system for tracking those emission reduction credits, or climate reserve tons, as they're called in our program, tracking those over time in a transparent registry system. So we do this by developing regulatory quality offset protocols and project guidelines for developing different offset project types. We oversee third-party verification, make sure that the emissions reductions that are reporting are independently verified. And again, operating a transparent registry of serialized credits and projects, and all that information is publicly accessible online on our website. So getting to the topic for today is event offsetting, and just want to kind of throw in what I feel is a bit of a growing trend and actually not just conferences and meetings, but also more recently I've been seeing sports events using offsets to offset not only the game, or event offsets, but also emissions related to transportation for fans to and from the game. So, for instance, Major League Baseball, there's several teams that have been using offsets, as well as RECs and purchases of renewable energy to make their events more sustainable. The NFL, the NBA All-Star Game, Stanley Cup playoffs, you can see there's quite a variety there. In fact, there's even kind of an emerging trade association emerging out of this called the Green Sports Alliance that we've worked with. That you could find more information, but they're really trying to raise the bar in sustainable sporting event management. And to that end, I just wanted to highlight the work that was done to reduce the environmental impact of this summer's Olympic Games in London. BP was the official carbon offset provider, and they created a BP Project Neutral, which is a very interesting kind of combination of social media and sponsorship to get spectators to sign up online to reduce their emissions for free. It was provided by BP. As of last week, over 300,000 spectators have signed up, and they expect to reduce 4,000 tons of emissions through this BP Project Neutral. And it's interesting to note there's all the offsets come from several different projects throughout the world, but one of them is some dairy farms in Wisconsin that are registered in our system. So in essence, we have cow manure greening the Olympics. So I've got Wholesome Elm Dairy's logo right there, and we'll just give them a quick shout out because it's pretty neat. They have combined 8,300 dairy cows, harvest approximately 550,000 pounds of milk per day, and their manure is put to use to create renewable energy and nutrient-rich fertilizer and bedding, as well as the carbon offset component. So just wanted to highlight that and segue into what we do for our own annual conference, Navigating the American Carbon World. So each year we have a conference bringing kind of all the big players in the carbon markets to San Francisco and a year before in Los Angeles. And we've partnered with TerraPass to offset the travel and accommodation emissions for all of our conference delegates and attendees. So we retired 350 and 330 CRTs in 2010 and 2011, respectively, through that partnership with TerraPass. And kind of something that I always say is that you don't want to just do offsets. Offsets should be part of a portfolio of environmental initiatives. So we try to go beyond that and minimize waste by eliminating bottled water and packed lunches, encouraging composting, working with the venue to make sure that they are following kind of the high standards in environmental practices. Even creating the menu for meals that we have at the conference, we try to place as much emphasis as possible on sourcing from local foods, and then choosing a venue. I think something they always say in marketing is location, location, location. So a big part of that is choosing a venue that's close to multiple forms of public transportation. So that's just a little something that we do for our events, and I think it'll segue well into what Paul and Tom are doing with their events as well. But before we get into their presentations, just want to give a quick overview of before you do just go buy any old offset. It's always good to kind of ask yourself a few questions that'll make sure that you have a high quality offset that represents a true emission reductions and has high environmental integrity. These are where is it registered? Is it at in a registry that has publicly accessible information? What makes it additional? How do you know that emission reduction wouldn't have otherwise occurred, as a business as usual scenario? Where is it located? What kind of project is it? What year did that emission recur? Offsets, funny enough, are kind of like wine, and that for every year that project is generating emission reductions, it's classed into a vintage. And how are they permanent? So I think if you look at the registry program and kind of our core principles, we go to great lengths to ensure that all these questions can be easily answered. And just to conclude my portion of the presentation, I wanted to try to highlight a way that you can try to make your offsets more meaningful for your customers, if you're a company or an event planner, the attendees. And I think there's, a variety of ways that you can do this, but choosing projects that match your organization's mission and values as well as your goals, involving your stakeholders, investing in the local community, and trying to find projects that might, have co-benefits. For instance, if it's a forestry project, you have, biodiversity habitat. If it's, a dairy farm, then you have co-benefits of, benefits to clean air and clean water at the local level. So I've got some pictures here of some projects, some dairy farms and a forestry project, as well as a composting facility. Those composting facilities, allow for high quality soil and fertilizer, and so there's a variety of co-benefits. And I think the real question is, saying, all right, what's a project that, beside the emission reduction, might, really resonate with our customers or with our conference attendees. And with that, as I mentioned, we're going to hold questions to the end, but I'll return to this slide later. My contact information is here, and these slides will be posted online. But right now, I would like to pass it to Paul, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he does at Oracle.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay. I'm Paul Salinger. I'm a Vice President of Marketing at Oracle, and I also happen to be the past president of the Green Meeting Industry Council, which is an association within the event industry that is working on sustainability as a transformation methodology for the event industry. I'm going to talk mostly about what we're doing at Oracle today. Running sustainable events has become a key initiative for us, and we primarily do it through our Open World conference, but we've taken some learnings from what we're doing at Oracle Open World and have started applying them across the board to all of the other 8,000 or so events that Oracle does around the world every year. And I'll just start out by talking about, in terms of sustainable event strategies, one of the things that we really look at is how can we reduce our overall impact, in the reduce, reuse, recycle kind of methodology. That's where we started from. And one of the key things that we've started working on and have done for a few years now is to engage the entire event supply chain, if you will, in terms of a sustainable event strategy. So we work very closely with the City of San Francisco, our main venue, Moscone Center, the hotels that we use for both meeting space and rooms for attendees. We work closely with all of our key logistics providers, our vendors that help us do operations, and then our internal stakeholders as well as all the people that do food and beverage. And the combination of bringing all of those groups together is what really gets you to an overall event strategy, because you need an engaged supply chain to really pull off the things that we've been doing at Oracle Open World. So Scott, why don't you go to the next slide for me? And so let me just talk about Oracle Open World. So it's a big impact event. We're expecting over 50,000 people this year, over 7 different venues. We run 2,100 sessions. We've got 450 partners on our exhibit hall and spread around all those different venues. When we started down this path in 2007, we really wanted to look at how can we start to reduce the overall impact that we are having on the community, on the environment, just socially, really looking at the whole triple bottom line aspect of this. And so we started down the road very early on of doing some of the things that Scott was just talking about, starting to minimize waste by eliminating bottled water, by looking at our lunch delivery system, looking at our overall waste diversion. And we're really looking at a number of key factors. Go to the next slide, Scott, if you would. So we really wanted to look at how do we reduce our overall footprint. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. I'm going to make one sort of provocative statement here in relationship to this particular webinar. What we really believe is that carbon offsetting is certainly a part of our strategy, but it's not our main strategy for how we're going to reduce our overall footprint. And I'll talk about that, and I'll say why in a couple of minutes here. We certainly see offsetting as important, but we think that that if you're just doing offsetting, that you're not really doing the work that you need to do in a number of different areas, especially from an event and conference perspective, to really reduce the overall impact on the environment and to reduce the overall impact on the community where you're doing the event. Go to the next slide. So here's the way that we're looking at it. GMIC has been involved over the last few years for developing a set of standards for the industry, the APEX standards, and they cover all of these various different sectors. And this is the way that we've been looking at it kind of from the beginning in partnership with Meet Green, who is a company that we partner with to really help us set the strategy, and they're our third-party kind of auditor, and they help write our sustainability report for us. But it really comes down to looking at a number of key questions and a number of key areas to partner with the rest of the supply chain that take in the destination itself. Scott talked about, looking for destinations that have good public transportation. That's certainly one element of it. But there are a number of things that the city of San Francisco, for example, we're very fortunate to be partnering with them and having Oracle Open World take place in San Francisco every year, in the sense that the city itself has a number of initiatives and programs in place. They have a very aggressive waste diversion program that they've got in place, and they're eventually working towards a zero waste, process for the whole city of San Francisco. So that is an incentive for the people that we work with, and it sets a good bar for everybody within the city to look at. Not to mention that we do have good public transportation here between BART and Muni, and some other areas within the city. So the destination is incredibly important, and it's a factor that we do look at. The venue is another area. Moscone Center, again, is a good partner. They've been a good partner. They've had a number of programs in place for a number of years around waste diversion and sustainability themselves. So the venue is the second area. Hotels and accommodations is the third area that we look at. And again, what we've done is we've brought the hotels into our event management process from the standpoint of having a survey that we do with them every year just to understand what they've got in place and to try and encourage them to up their ante in terms of waste diversion, and to look at the processes that they have in place, and the food and beverage and all the various different things that go into that event supply chain, trying to build in the right requirements so that they are matching our overall event management strategy. Food and beverage is another area that is incredibly important. Scott talked about, packed lunches. He talked about sourcing local food. Over the last few years, we have done an amazing job of increasing our sourcing of local food and our sourcing of organic food. We've worked very hard with our local catering companies and the people that provide the boxed lunches to make sure that everything that they provide in there is sustainable or compostable. And then working even closely with the local waste company, Recology, to make sure that what is being delivered into the waste stream is actually compostable, and that we can make sure that we are doing the right things in terms of waste diversion. And we've seen some good results there, and we have some very aggressive goals. We're trying to get Open World up to the same level as the city of San Francisco's waste diversion goal of 75% this year. We're hoping that we can do that. There's always challenges to that, but we are working hard to do that. Transportation is another area, and this is the main area where I'm going to talk about offsets in a minute. But there's a couple of different aspects to the transportation part. There's certainly the attendee travel, most of which is, a lot of which is air travel. But there's also the local, on the ground transportation. using buses is sometimes regarded as kind of noisy and polluting and whatnot, but it's actually a pretty efficient way of moving a lot of people at one time without them being in individual cars and taxis and those kind of things. So a combination of, efficient bus travel that's using modern bus fleets with high maintenance levels, some of them using biofuels, combined with public transportation is a good way of looking at, how to deal with transportation issues. And then we have our kind of production elements, so the exhibit hall floor, our audiovisual production, but kind of lumped those into kind of one big bucket. But everything that we do on the exhibit floor is another area where we've tried to increase our waste diversion and try to look at, how our exhibitors are transporting their goods to the show. What kinds of materials are they using in their booths and in their displays? Can we help to reduce our overall paper reduction by reducing the amount of collateral that comes into the exhibit hall, for example? So there's a number of different things that we're doing in the exhibit hall area as well. And then we have marketing and communications. Oracle, being a software company a long time ago, we started moving towards electronic communications. We don't produce much, if any, paper communications in the audience acquisition phase at this point. But there's still obviously some paper that needs to be produced. One of the key areas that we've been able to reduce in the last few years on the paper side is our conference guide. We used to publish a conference guide that was about 400 pages long, was printed on very glossy, high quality paper. That was an area that we felt that we could make some real improvements in. We reduced that down to 100 pages, and made a trade-off by then producing it all on 100% post-consumer recycled paper using soy ink, so that it became a much more sustainable piece. And now we've gone to eliminating that conference guide altogether, except for a very small kind of paper pullout that people can easily have access to the overall schedule without carrying around a lot of paper, and gone to a mobile application for most of our other communication. And then the last area is kind of on-site practices. So it's all the recycling, it's all the show offices, it's all the backstage stuff. What are the elements that we're doing there? So the one key piece here that obviously is not talked about is carbon offsetting. And we started looking at this a couple of years ago, and the main area that we have to deal with in terms of big carbon output is really the attendee travel, because we do have people coming from not only all over the United States, but really all over the world. We have a pretty healthy attendance population from Europe, from Asia, from Latin America. That makes up about 20% overall of the 50,000 people that are coming to Open World. Plus, we've got a lot of people coming from the East Coast and the Midwest. So there's a couple of different ways that we decided that we could deal with this. And as Scott said, we also are starting off, with a voluntary program, if you will. We started this last year after developing a baseline for the first couple of years of what our overall carbon output was. We started looking at the air travel as kind of the one area where we don't have a lot of control of reducing and recycling and reusing, and that was the area that we thought that made the most sense in terms of carbon offsets. Last year, it was a very voluntary program. It was an opt-in program, and we had maybe about 1 to 1.5% response on that opt-in program. So when people registered, and then even on site, they could opt in and they could check a box, and we would take their $10 fee or whatever were charging. This year we switched to an opt-out program, and we're getting much better results. I think we're up to about 17% or so of people that have not opted out of the carbon offset program. And so little by little, we're increasing our participation in that carbon offset, with it still being voluntary. A lot of it comes down to, attendee education, and we do partner with TerraPath as well for what we're doing with carbon offsetting. So we've started talking about, what are the different options around carbon offsetting? Can we start to think of this almost as behavioral economics? Scott and Tom and I were talking about this the other day. It's a little bit, can we change behavior? And if we can't change behavior, can we set it up in a way to where, the offsetting is sort of built in? So we are starting to look at, whether down the road we will want to actually just build the carbon offset into the fee that people pay to register, or potentially into the fee that exhibitors pay to exhibit at Oracle Open World, so that we would then take those fees and then Oracle would just, apply them to a carbon offset project with TerraPath, and we would handle it that way, as opposed to individual, capturing of the $10 fee that we're charging, and then, having a smaller percentage of people. We'd like to get, that number up significantly higher, but we do need to kind of work with our attendees and work with our supply chain and work with our exhibitors and make sure that people understand what we're trying to do and are comfortable with what we're trying to do, because we don't want to just sort of force this onto people, because there's a lot of people that are not necessarily doing it. They don't. So those are some of the strategies that we're taking to do sustainable event management and to think about offsetting. So if you go to the next slide. Let's come down to measuring everything. So across each of those sectors that I talked about, we have key performance indicators that we're measuring year over year, and there's a calculator that we use that Meet Green provides. Is their Meet Green calculator. When we started in this process, on that scale of 0 to 100, we were at about 34 because we were only doing certain things, and we had not really engaged our supply chain. We're now at about 85 on that calculator 5 years later. We're shooting to get to 90 this year, although this year is proving to be challenging because we have a lot of new programs and a lot of new people coming in. But that is our goal. Our goal is to keep increasing that number every year. And the other thing, of course, that we are measuring, obviously, is our carbon footprint, because we want to be able to understand what the baseline of that carbon is, so that we can continue to look for opportunities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions overall, both in the transportation sector and in other areas where it might apply, whether it be facilities, whether it be the hotels, whether it be the food and beverage supply chain. We will continue to look for opportunities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and carbon offsetting will be one part of that strategy. Again, it's not going to be probably our main strategy, and I'm not sure it should be anybody's main strategy for carbon reduction, because I think you have to do the work. You have to look at your whole supply chain. You have to look at all the various different areas where you are potentially, having an impact, measure those areas, create some baselines, and then understand how you can make some trade-offs and how you can, work to reduce things in those areas. So I think measurement is incredibly important, and we continue to do that. And we're starting to do that now, again, with all of our events. So if you go to the next slide. Thanks. So as I said, the big challenge, I think, is educating the attendees, and not only just about the carbon offset piece, but really about why sustainability is actually important and why sustainability is actually an opportunity for us to enhance the customer experience at our events and at our conferences. The fact that we're using sustainability actually as a cost-saving method is one way in which we're investing back in the conference from a customer experience standpoint, taking the monies that we're saving from our operational efficiencies, taking the money that we're saving and investing it back into the overall experience from a content perspective and from a networking perspective, so that our attendees have a better experience overall. But it takes a lot of education, and I think that this is something that's very ongoing, and that, I don't know that we've really even cracked the nut on yet in terms of getting people to understand that, the behaviors, and again, I'll come back to that behavioral economics term, the behaviors that we can get them to help us with, whether it be recycling, whether it be, making sure that they compost, whether it be making sure that they, don't ask for paper things, that they help us in our paper reduction, any number of things, as well as participating in the carbon offset, whether we continue to make it a voluntary opt-out situation or whether we build it into the fees, it will be incredibly important, and it is incredibly important, and Scott touched on this, to educate attendees not only about what we're doing, but also about where that money is going and what we're investing in, whether we're investing back into the conference or through the carbon offsetting program. What kinds of programs are we participating in? How does it benefit the overall perspective of what we're trying to do from a conference perspective, a company perspective, and even hopefully, ultimately tying it back into a benefit to society and to the attendees themselves. So if you go to my last slide, I'll just talk for a moment about the Green Meeting Industry Council. The Green Meeting Industry Council, as I said, is an association that is working to transform the event industry through sustainability, and it's very much in alignment with a lot of what I talked about today. It's transforming, creating really more successful and better meetings by looking at sustainability as a lens through which we look at the way that we do event management. In the industry, there's the ISO standard that the London Olympics used, and which GMIC has also been a partner in. There's the GRI, or Global Reporting Initiative, which is kind of the measurement and reporting piece of sustainability, which again, GMIC has had a place at the table in developing the event organizers sector supplement to that. And GMIC is really working and partnering with other people within the industry to, to help make sustainability really important in the industry. And GMIC has pretty much the same philosophy around carbon offsetting that I just talked about. We think that carbon offsetting is an important piece of the strategy, but it's not the whole strategy. And we really work with people to help them to understand that, where carbon offsetting can really take a place in in meetings and conferences. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, because he's going to talk about, some of the things that they're doing, some of the programs that they're doing for carbon offsetting. So Tom?
Thanks a lot, Paul. I think there's a little delay for some reason shifting the slides, but thanks for bearing with me here. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. I know that something we do at our conference as well is in terms of engaging and educating the attendees is including like a one-pager, in the conference materials that kind of gives a whole summary of, things that not only we're doing, but things that they can participate in as well. So Tom, are you all ready to go?
I am. Thank you.
All right, I'll pass it to you.
Good. I'm Tom Rawls. I'm with Native Energy. Native Energy is a retail provider of offsets and RECs. We've been in business almost a dozen years now, one of the early entrants into the voluntary offset market. Our clients are primarily businesses. We have individuals as well. Many of our clients are well known for as being leaders in corporate social responsibility. Firms like Ben & Jerry's, Stoningfield Farms, Cliff Bar. At the same time, we have a number of other clients that you may not think of in the same space, like Esurance and eBay, for example. Just regarding events, I think every event we work with, and here's a list up here, every event we work with knows that that part of their responsibility is to think about the variety of ways they can address the consequences of putting on an event and gathering people. So I don't know anyone who's just offsetting. Everyone's doing a number of the things Paul talked about. But I think if you do that, you also recognize that being a 21st century human means you're going to have a footprint. That's just the way it is. So you are going to have, your event is going to result in some carbon pollution, or greenhouse gas pollution. We've done a variety of events and different kinds of events. You can see there people like Sustainable Brands or the Association of Climate Change Officers. These are large organizations. CERES is another example. They're strong organizations that are strong, have a strong sustainability focus, and that's certainly a part of what we do. We've dealt with a number of sort of smaller local events, the Hartford Marathon, the Cherry Blossom Marathon, Esurance Tennis Classic. So these are events that also will in some way address their carbon footprint. And finally, just as Oracle has done with its business gathering, we've done some business gatherings. Best Buy, for example, small gathering they had with utility folks. We've offset that. So we're prepared to work with events to help them understand their carbon footprint and to address it with offsets and of course other activities as well as Paul describes. So next slide, we can sort of, Paul made the point, sort of what are the large sources of greenhouse gas emissions. You can see that if you think of where you hold the event and the energy use related to the event, this is a Sustainable Brands event, 590 tons, 4 tons result from energy use at the venue. But you got 550 tons that are air travel. So clearly, if you are going to offset, addressing the air travel is the big one. Local travel is relatively modest. Hotel rooms relatively modest. Air travel is the one that's the largest producer. We help events sort of assess the size of the footprint and think about how they want to address it. Now, when you're talking about offsets, I think of what one of Scott's colleagues at the Climate Action Reserve said: a ton is a ton is a ton. So a reduction of a ton anywhere on the globe is equivalent from an environmental standpoint. But that doesn't mean, as Scott noted, that everyone's going to like every project the same. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to offer a couple of quick examples of the kinds of projects that create carbon reductions that we've brought to events so they can offset. So you've got this intangible gas that you can't smell, touch, feel, and so how do you make offsetting tangible? Well, what we found is most successful is to talk specifically about the project that's producing the reductions. So here, this project is a landfill methane capture, but one of its distinctive features is it's in central Oklahoma. The gas is taken directly to a local brick factory. That gas goes in, fires the kilns at the factory. So you've got this local economic development, which is an attractive feature for some people. Next example I've got, just to give you an idea of the kinds of projects that are possible. This is a small wind project, 2 turbines. It's not, it's not 30, 40, 50 turbines. It's 2 turbines on adjacent pieces of farmland. So you've got the greenhouse gas reductions resulting from the clean energy and the benefits to the rural agricultural community, and clearly that's appealing to some people. The last example is a Climate Action Reserve project. It's a landfill gas project. We used tons from this project to offset the ECHO, Climate Change Officers, EPA Climate Leadership event in Fort Lauderdale earlier this year, and this is the poster we put together to sort of capture the consequences, the greenhouse gas consequences in a somewhat different, I guess a different, we hope more engaging way, and talk about what the reductions are accomplishing. So one of the things you can do at your event is think about, okay, how do I want to talk about these offsets here? We're talking about the volume of tons equivalent to a herd of bull elephants. During and after the event, next slide, you can talk, you have opportunities to talk about what you did. These are just screenshots. After the Sustainable Brands event, we deliver a report to the event that talks about what the greenhouse, the volume of greenhouse gas emissions, the sources, i.e. air travel, venue, electricity, local travel, accommodations. We talk about the projects that were used to address the event's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a way to reinforce with the event goers the activities on the carbon side to address those consequences. Someone like Sustainable Brands, you've got this is an organization puts together an event. Its members, its attendees are leaders in sustainability, so it's going to do a whole array of activities to reduce impacts broadly, and the carbon offset piece is one additional piece in that whole toolkit they have to quote green your event. As Paul said, you've got as an event, you've got a couple of ways to deal with offsetting. You've got the opt-in, that is allowing the event attendee to choose either at registration or when they arrive to sign up for offsets. That gets a low rate of involvement. If you use the opt-out, that is you basically make it a default that they will offset unless they check the box not to. That gets you a better rate of involvement. And then we have events where they do what we refer to as embed the offsets. They embed the anticipated emissions in the cost of registration. It's it's going to be approximately, on average, a ton, perhaps round number, a ton per attendee. Not a huge cost to include on an event registration fee, where in a lot of cases you're talking $1,000 or more. So again, depending on how hard you want to drive your carbon reductions, you've got sort of this dial you can turn up or down as you proceed. As I say, we work with a number of events. We sponsor some events, and we're happy to talk about how we could do it with your events or how we've done it with others. We found it effective. We found the events we've worked with have valued their ability to talk about this piece of the greening of their overall event. So the last slide, I don't know, Scott, if you're sending these around to folks, but it's got contact information if anyone wants to pick up the conversation after we're done today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tom. So I think right now we're going to open it up to questions, and I see we've already got a few questions that are queued up here, and I'll go ahead and address those. But also, I'd like to encourage anyone on the line to ask as many questions they have through the questions box on the webinar software. So without any more delay, I'll go ahead and look at the questions that we already have. So from Jeff, I believe this is to Paul. How many ways are you touching the attendees about this program, and are you engaging them personally? Paul, are you there?
myself on mute. How many ways are we touching the attendees, and what was the second part of the question?
Are you engaging them on a personal level?
Right. Well, I would say that the personal level is, again, through registration and through giving them the opportunity to, do the carbon offset. I mean, each of that obviously is on an individual level right now. So that's the main way, is through registration. At the event itself, the ways that we're touching them, come down to things like making sure that we've got, plenty of recycling opportunities around the conference, and then engaging with, we hire local people called our Green Angels through an organization here in San Francisco. And their job is to engage attendees and make sure that they are putting their, various different items that they're trying to dispose of in the right containers, whether it be, the recycle container or the compost container or the landfill container. We do have people around the conference to help them with that. And then, the other ways that we are obviously engaging with them is through the fact that we don't deliver bottled water, but we have water stations around. We give every attendee gets a reusable water bottle, so that they can, hydrate themselves during the conference by going to any of the water stations, and we have lots of them around the conference to get their water that way. We're engaging them, obviously, through our mobile application and our virtual collateral rack. Those are sort of two different ways in which we're reducing paper. So we don't allow any paper collateral to come to the show from Oracle. We encourage our exhibitors not to ship any paper collateral to the show. Instead, we have an electronic site, which we call our virtual collateral rack, where people can go and download any piece of collateral that they may want, and then either just have it as an electronic communication, or if they really feel like they need to print it out, they can print it out on their own when they get back home. So there's lots of different ways that we're engaging the attendees. We're, one of the ways that we're doing it is giving them an opportunity to take public transportation from the airport. We've partnered with the local transportation company, BART, to get passes available for open world attendees. So lots of different ways, in terms of the ways that we engage attendees. But the most individual way is, again, through that registration process, where every attendee, goes in and does, if they choose to not opt out of the carbon offsets, then we add that, $10 fee to their overall pricing. And if they choose to opt out, then they've got to check that box. So those are just some of the ways in which we, directly, engage with our attendees. And then on the education side, probably the way that we do it the most right now is through our website. So on the Open World website, under, I don't remember which tab it's under, but there is a whole piece about what we're doing around sustainability. And we do try, even on site, we try to give them some education from the standpoint of our chief marketing officer every year gets up at the start of the conference as part of the welcome and talks about the various different highlights during the conference. And we're now starting in the last couple of years to talk about our green program. And again, encouraging attendees to participate by recycling, reusing, reducing, all of those various things, and again, to participate in the carbon offset if they can. So those are just a few of the ways in which we're engaging our attendees.
Okay, great. I've got a follow-up regarding the education component. I've got a question from Kay to Paul, asking, like, as a percentage of the overall event cost, how much is the education component? How does that factor in?
As the overall cost of the event, I'm not totally sure I follow the question.
Yeah, or maybe.
So are we spending money on educating the attendees? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I guess the question is saying, like how much money is required for the education component in a percentage of the event when attempting to educate the attendees about the sustainability initiative.
Right. So In effect, zero, because again, we're doing most of the education with our internal resources that don't, go to the bottom line of the conference per se. I would say where the costs have come in, and we've made these trade-offs, and over time, over the last 5 years, we've actually have a massive reduction in costs. We've saved over $1.5 million through our sustainability program. But we do spend money on certain things. So we spend money on the temps who are our green angels. We spend money on the water stations to some degree. But the overall education itself really doesn't cost us anything per se. That communication that's on the website, the communication that we do, through our chief marketing officer, that doesn't really cost us anything. I mean, where we've made trade-offs is in looking at, could we save money by reducing areas over here? We obviously saved a lot of money when we stopped delivering bottled water because we were spending a lot of money on purchasing that bottled water, and now we're spending far less money because we're down to the point where our water delivery system is municipal tap water. San Francisco has great water that comes out of the tap. We tap into that, and that's what goes into our water stations. So there are some trade-offs that you make along the way, but overall our net is that we've saved a lot of money as opposed to spending money. The amount of money that we invest in attendee education is pretty minimal.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So I've got a question, and I see another person has also asked a similar question, and I guess I'll lead off with the question that I had was about the Meet Green, the calculator. I was wondering if, and maybe you don't have all of this information, but I wondered what type of metrics go into that calculator. And then a question from Alyssa that has also kind of chimed in on a similar issue, and she asked, is it recommended to buy the APEX standards and measure yourself, or should you hire a third party such as Meet Green to benchmark and kind of set the initiatives for the company?
So the second question is an interesting one, and let me address that separately. So the Meet Green calculator is very much actually aligned to the APEX standards. They actually cover all what are actually now 9 different sectors of the APEX standards, and they're all the ones that I talked about, including AV production and exhibit hall production as 2 separate sectors. And they've now added actually carbon offsetting as a component of the Meet Green calculator. So the calculator itself is a great tool. And you can actually license it through Meet Green. You don't necessarily even have to use Meet Green. The way that we use it is every year we go in and we look at each of the different sectors, and we look at what are our key performance indicators. What are the things that we want to make sure that we measure? And they've been consistent, over a number of years now. So essentially now we're just adding on to them as opposed to changing them year over year, because we want to make sure that we're creating, consistent baselines and looking at our year over year performance in all the different areas. So I think we're up to, I've lost track, but I think we're over 100 key performance indicators across all of the different sectors that we're measuring. If you go to oracle.com/openworld and go under the sustainability part of OpenWorld, you can actually find our sustainability report from 2011, and we've got other ones. If you go on the GMIC website, for example, gmicglobal.org, you can also find our sustainability case study from this past couple of years, I believe. And you can see that it lists out some of the key performance indicators that we track and measure. Now, the second part of that question about the APEX standards themselves, that's an interesting question, and I think it is very dependent on the size of your organization and what it is that you're trying to achieve. The APEX standards are certainly a great tool to give you kind of a checklist, if you will, or give you kind of a way to execute sustainability. They're not for everybody to get started with right off the bat. They can be a little bit overwhelming when you first get them. And yes, you can go and purchase them from ASTM and take a look at them. There are also some summaries. If you go to the GMIC website, I think you can actually access an area where you can get a kind of a summary of the standards. And if you need help with that, let me know, and I'll try and help with it. But I think you have to look at your own particular circumstance. For a conference like Oracle Open World that is huge and where we are really covering every single one of the sectors, it makes sense for us, and we are starting to look at how we're, the work that we've done over the last, 5 years was kind of a precursor and leading up to us aligning to the APEX standards. And so this year we'll definitely be looking to map most of what we're doing against the APEX standards. But for other events, I think you have to look at what is your particular circumstance. And, the one nice thing about the standards is that, you don't have to apply all of the standards to every single event. I mean, you can sort of look at, which areas actually apply to the event that I'm doing. Maybe you're not doing an event that has an exhibit hall or has, a massive food and beverage program or something along those lines. You can take the pieces that are germane to what you're doing and look at them and see, how you can apply them. And getting to, kind of just the category 1 level, if you do the basic things, is not that hard. So it depends on what is it that you're trying to achieve. And I think just for sustainability event strategy in general, you kind of want to start from that point anyway of like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are your overall objectives? Is it mapping to, what the company's trying to accomplish, from a business standpoint? And then look at, whether the standards apply to you. There's so much information out there now on the GMIC site and just in general. Even the EPA has a great site for event people in terms of, the kinds of things that the government looks at for their own events and what the EPA recommends as a green event. There's so much information out there that can get you started on being a more sustainable event planner, being more a sustainable event management person, that that starting with the standards may not be the right thing. I mean, they're definitely something that you want to aspire to, and they're definitely something that the industry as a whole needs to start embracing and needs to start looking at, so that we have a common language and a common vocabulary against which everybody can kind of measure how sustainable they are as an event.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't realize this has been a learning process, that there are so much emerging standards and for the meetings and events industries. So I've got another question coming in to Tom from Jeff. You had mentioned kind of a rough estimate for conference, emissions per attendee is kind of 1 ton per attendee. Does that cover all areas, including, travel to the event, as well as, event activities and things like that?
Yeah, that estimate is based on getting to the conference. Each person's share of venue energy use is almost irrelevant. Local travel, very little. So the big piece is getting to and from the conference, particularly if there's airfare and hotel accommodations. We're not capturing all the greenhouse gas emissions related to, let's say, food prep. That's, we're focused on travel, venue, energy, and hotel. But yeah, a ton. I mean, if you're, round trip cross country, that's obviously going to be more airfare than if it's, round trip from the middle of the country to one of the coasts. So you roll it all together, on average, you're talking a ton.
Sorry, Tom, if I can jump in on that one as well. One of the things that we did start doing a couple of years ago is actually measuring food miles, because we did want to actually understand, how much food miles we had per meal. And so we've drastically reduced it over the last couple of years, because I think that, again, that is another area that we can start to control in terms of overall greenhouse gas emissions, is if we can reduce the amount of food miles that are being consumed, if you will, for any particular meal. And if we can source more locally and if we can source more organically, we can start to, impact the overall carbon output from an event.
Okay, great. That's really fascinating. Well, I guess we're just rearing on 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock. So I think as the moderator and kind of organizer, I'll go ahead and want to thank both Paul and Tom for participating today. It's been very interesting. I've definitely learned a lot. And as well as thank all of our attendees for joining us this morning for this presentation. And I'll go ahead and end the webinar and wish everyone a good day and look forward to working with everyone on greening events. So thank you very much, Paul and Tom.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Thank you, Scott.